Hello friends, my name is Ian Khan and welcome to the Future of Work Explained. In this short documentary, we'll talk to some incredible experts from across the world and learn about the future of work. Now, the future of work is something that's constantly evolving, and a lot of different things are impacting the future of work. Some of these are technologies such as automation, robotics, Industry 4.0. All of these have an impact on the work we do. Many jobs are being outsourced, many jobs are automated, and people are changing jobs as a result of that. There's a constant augmentation of the workforce, which means we are seeing different roles evolve and many roles phase out with time. How does that impact what we do for work? And how does that impact the workforce around the world? In different industries, from accounting to manufacturing, in different industries such as space exploration or medical sciences, every job is changing a little bit every single day. In this documentary, I present you perspectives that I gathered by speaking with these experts from everywhere and across the board. We have representation from the consulting side of the industry, from manufacturing, and many others. First of all, I'd like to say that as we go forward from an era that COVID-19 has created, and as we head into a time where a significant change in work has taken place, we should recognize that having skills and changing skills and acquiring new skills should be a big part of what we do. You'll hear some of these things in the conversations that I'll present you in the next few minutes. But please take this documentary as a dipping of the toes into something that's constantly evolving. If you open the news, you hear about the metaverse and many other technologies that are going to change the world, and they will. The next 5, 10, 15, 20 years in our lifetime are going to radically and dramatically change the way we do things. And the reason for this is that change is a constant. Change has always happened and it'll continue to happen. So we shouldn't really be surprised if things change around us. And what is in our control is to change ourselves and to acquire skills that are used and can be used in the future. Without further ado, let's look at these conversations and see who's up first.
When I reflect back on the last 12 to 18 months, we've seen massive change with respect to the nature of work in consulting. And the good news is, as I sit here today, I'm so optimistic about the future. And that's because I think our profession has demonstrated amazing resilience over the last 12, 18 months. If you and I had had this conversation a year ago, I think we would have had legitimate questions about how do you move a profession that is largely in person, sitting side by side with their teams and their clients each and every day, to 100% virtual by way of delivery of the services, hiring of new team members, onboarding of new team members, and the development of our teams.
I think just like the rest of the economy, manufacturing has changed dramatically because of the pandemic. I think it's how we work. Majority of manufacturers stayed open throughout the height of closures and when the economy kind of came to a pause in the spring of 2020. Most manufacturers remained open because, of course, they were part of this essential response. And not only the consumer goods we needed, the PPE, all of the other protective equipment, but everything we need to live our lives. And so manufacturing remained open, but how we worked was different. So, of course, production teams needed to be on the floor, but those who could be remote, companies made a really concerted effort to use new technology to allow some of their workforce to be remote so that they were able to keep those who had to be in on the production floor safe. And so I think the adoption of technology of remote work really accelerated in manufacturing, just like it did throughout most of the economy. One of our biggest challenges in the sector is this antiquated idea of manufacturing. I think people have this, we go out and do research on this, and people have this idea of like it's a B-roll from the 50s, 60s, 70s, whatever your generation is, what seemed like old movie B-roll in your mind, and that it was very manual, and manufacturing is hardly that anymore today. And it is very automated. It has a lot of technology, and it has people working alongside the technology, the automation that has come on to make us be more productive. That replaces tasks, not jobs. And that is what has truly, I think, accelerated in the last several years. COVID was interesting. We weren't sure at the beginning if more automation was going to be invested in because of COVID, because of the physical distancing. And yet what we found is projects that were already online continue to pace. I think the onboarding of new technology is a tremendous benefit to our older workers, our more mature and skilled workers. Let's face it, it's going to allow people to stay in the workforce longer. I have tons of stories and examples of companies that have brought on new technology that's allowed an older worker to be able to continue in their job because now they're operating the machinery, not actually doing something themselves. Older workers are able to then engage the millennials and the Gen Zs with some of the ways that things are done, the unwritten rules, the things that you learn just through experience. And that is strengthening. So we've seen through our research at the Manufacturing Institute that workers are actually able to stay longer because of the new technologies. And companies are constantly, education is not a destination. It is an ongoing process in careers today, particularly in manufacturing. Our technology is evolving annually. Every year there's new things coming on, new ways to do things that are faster, better, stronger, but also more efficient so that we can keep production here.
We always had this mentality of, I want this person as a direct report to me to be at headquarters so that I can see them, I can be with them every day. I've fundamentally changed my opinion about that. Having you have to go to an office 8 to 5 every day, 5 days a week, I think those days are long gone.
The idea of the sort of 40-hour, 5-day work week with the 2-day weekend, it's such an old concept. The genesis of that has so much to do with, our lives in the agricultural world, has some religious connotations. There's a whole range of reasons that in a very diverse world and progressive world are probably not that relevant anymore.
Well, to me, the last 1.5 years is an acceleration of a trend that was really already going on, going back to maybe 2008, which was the digitization of work, the use of AI and software and mobile apps and video and social networking. But then the pandemic pretty much taught us that this digital stuff is much more powerful than we realized, and that people can work in any location and be very, very productive.
Probably for the first 30 to 60 days, many companies were paralyzed. And then we realized that this pandemic was going to last longer than originally thought. And so people started looking at the white space and understanding what can we really do differently. Probably the first thing that happened was the embrace of technology. The companies that were farther along their technology roadmap were the first to start moving again. And by that, I mean they had Teams in place, they had Zoom in place, they had Miro, they had other tools that allowed their workers and vendors to work collaboratively through technology.
We first look at the past. We look at what the future of work was in the past and how work was done in the past. We're not going to go too deep into history, but getting some perspective on how things were done will really help go forward.
I've spent the last 1.5 years finding the best talent I could find wherever they live and hire them wherever they are. And I think many companies, smart CEOs are going to take that same approach. There are many technologies that are out there today that are ways that teams can spend time together and interact as teams and share content with each other in a meaningful way.
One of the things that I think has shifted most dramatically is the use of video conferencing. And so we and our clients have the capability to use it at this level for a significant period of time. But in many companies, it just wasn't the norm. Whereas today it is much more the norm. And I think what we're finding is that through these capabilities, we actually can collaborate together really well. And so that means we've got more choices with respect to when we need to be in person and when we can be virtual, which I think is wonderful.
The nature of work is changing. Americans, for example, North Americans, are increasingly freelancing, right? They're not even part of an organization. The data is quite remarkable. It's now in the 35, almost 40% of Americans are freelancing. So work has always evolved. Let's recognize that. This is the idea that a job that you were doing today might not be relevant in 5 years is not necessarily a new concept. What we can say, though, is the frequency and the velocity by which the workforce is changing is different than it was in previous generations and previous centuries. What is the biggest risk to enterprises today? My answer is sometimes surprising. My answer is relevancy. Because the ability for that sort of startup to enter your space and effectively destroy your business in a short amount of time is higher than it's ever been. So you got to be continuing to reinvent and rethink.
I think work is no longer a place, it's a thing you do. And sometimes there's a place involved, sometimes there's not a place involved. And I think that's now become very clear to every company. One of the big changes, Ian, that I've seen in the workforce in my career, and I'm in my mid-60s, is if you go back to the 70s and the 80s, work was all about conforming. You're going to be like everybody else. And the more you can be like everybody else, the better you're going to perform in your career because the company is expecting conformity.
We talk about the future of work, but I really think it's the now of work. Now the theme is radical flexibility. Not only where work gets done, but how it gets done and by whom. And I mean that companies now are really rethinking their human capital supply chains and bringing strategies that are much more agile and flexible and based upon skills needed versus full-time equivalent roles. There's a saying that baby boomers used to fit life into work, and today it's the opposite. Today we fit work into life. We had some employees that lived out of an RV and worked from national parks. They could because they had the talent set that was so in demand, they knew they could stay busy as long as they could find Wi-Fi. That's a completely different paradigm than 30 years ago when an employer would have offered a job, would have been in one specific location, and would have had required hours. That just doesn't happen today. 40% of the workforce is thinking about quitting their jobs. Okay? Every employer is going to have to deal with that reality. The talent has learned through the pandemic that they want different things from the employer-employee relationship.
So thinking about how we build work that is productive, that's meaningful for people and rewarding, I think is where we should be focusing our efforts in terms of what's our vision for the future of work, and then what do we need to do to bring that to life. Work is a very human endeavor, and work is shaped by humans, right? It's sort of our choices. What are the incentives and norms we have around work? What are our expectations, and how do we shape business policies, public policies, and our own practices?
It's going to be a while before people feel like it's the normal is to go to the office instead of stay home. I adamantly believe that technology amplifies human nature. You hear stories of people that are on Zoom meetings from 6 a.m. till 8 o'clock at night. Well, that's a choice that they've made. And so Zoom, i.e. the technology in this case, is just amplifying their own behaviors. And so I think we'll actually get greater transparency into the behaviors of our workforce.
Now let's look at the present. Let's look at the current times where we live, times that are shaped by massive change across the world, whether it's social, economic reasons, whether it's the pandemic or wars that are taking place, whether it's social unrest or changes that emerging technology is bringing. The present is constantly changing. Let's look at some of the comments on the present.
I think thinking too short term, nothing's going to change that quickly in the next year or two or three. Well, these trends are happening over, I would say we'll see the significant changes in sort of more the decade type time horizon and beyond. There's no doubt that remote working is here to stay. Working from home, or WFX, working from anywhere, is sort of the new mantra. The cost of working has been enormous to mental health, of course, physical health. Still a lot of danger to a lot of jobs. People aren't satisfied. People aren't happy a lot. So how we design and deliver working really does ultimately reflect on whether we are happier as humans.
99% of employees want to do the right thing. They want to be successful. They want to get promoted. They want to get a raise. They want to help their peers. So just because somebody maybe couldn't come into the office or is working at home for their own choice doesn't mean they're not doing the job. We're in a very tight labor market and it's getting worse. So it isn't really so much of a choice anymore. It's really a decision of how much flexibility you want to offer people. And if you do it in a trusted way where the employees feel that they are trusted and not monitored and micromanaged, they'll abide by the policies and usually do a great job.
So how do we think about different structures that would encourage companies to engage people in the work? It's something technology companies use regularly, right? They have ways that they give people equity in the firm and that sort of thing. So can we think about different ways to sort of expand that so that there's sort of more of a shared stake in the success of different kinds of enterprises? But I do see a trend of people trying to take less of a atomized view of work and more of a holistic view of sort of how do we design work for people again and not think of people and robots as being the same.
I thought this change that we have gone through would have happened many years ago, because the inefficiencies of going to an airport and climbing on a plane and all the time lost getting from to and from places, the commute time, it can be so much more productive with all of the technology that exists and is ever changing now.
One issue that I see for the future is how do you deal with balancing isolation and yet keeping an engaged and productive workforce. Innovations are also accelerating, and when innovations converge and have societal impact, that progress is deflationary. That's why we all walk around with billion-dollar computers in our pockets today, called smartphones.
What some people are referring to as return to work is actually going to be more difficult than the abrupt change that we all faced when we left work to go to our virtual space. The shift in March, we all had no choice. It was sort of like abandoned ship. You had to get into the life rafts. You had to go home and you had to figure out how to work from home. And we all did that. This is different. Now we're all coming back voluntarily. And each person is going to have different views on what they are willing to do in this volunteer world coming back.
Challenges. There are countless challenges when it comes to the future of work. We have to observe and record and see what are these challenges and how can we overcome them. Every industry has some challenges. Some industries have challenges of not being able to attract the right talent. Some have the challenge of not being able to produce goods and equipment. Some have other challenges such as not being able to grow. Let's look at some of the challenges that we face right now because of the changes to the future of work.
So if we look 3 to 5 years from now, we will have experienced greater advancements in artificial intelligence and machine learning, advancements in edge computing, 5G networks, having sensors everywhere. And so while I think that we will reflect on the massive amount of change that happened in the last year and a half, I think it's just the beginning of this rapid pace of change and how technology changes how we all live.
In sort of the decade ahead of us, I think we're going to see significantly more freelancers. If we're at 40% now, could we see 60% of the workforce being in the sort of freelance economy? It's possible. For a long time now, it's become clear that people are having several different types of jobs. What we're now going to see are people that, you know, may have been a lawyer until they were 28, and then at 29 they become a software engineer, you know, and maybe by the time they're in their 40s they decide to be an actor, perhaps. So this idea that we'll have multiple jobs is going to be much more common. So your job may be going away, or you could feel that it's in less demand and you could feel at risk. So you know, if you are looking at that thing that excites you, that next interesting job, you know, be learning for it. Be learning for it. What kind of jobs will be opened up as a result of maybe cryptocurrency or blockchain, right? What kind of jobs will be required in a world of increasing use of artificial intelligence? Yeah, AI is going to displace workers, but it's also going to create work.
But basically what we now know is that automation creates jobs. It eliminates some work, but it creates new opportunities, new roles, higher value work. So we don't need to be worried about the robots taking jobs away from us. The future of work is much more of us using machines in new ways, giving up the more routine approaches to many things, and just taking advantage of the technology that's available. So one of the things that's going on in the future of work is accommodating the individuality of each worker and finding ways to embrace that and support that, despite the fact that the work has to get done and the company has to move ahead.
I believe it's a balance that we need going forward. We'll have great tools to enable our work, but we still need human connection. We still need collaboration. We still need to bring judgment and empathy to the work we do, I think, to create the best solutions moving forward. I mean, in our organization, we talk about building what we call the power of human competencies, which are things like creativity, radical listening, communication, empathy. All of those talents are things that will become more and more important as we need to work together as humans in concert with the technology that enables our job.
We know that the manufacturing companies are investing in their workers, and doing so because they know that when they have a higher skilled job that they need to fill, their best applicants are going to be their own workforce that they raise up through new upskilling. And so I think we need to have a mind shift. It's no longer you have one job your whole career, even if you stay with one company. It's that you're continually evolving through education, through upskilling, and the sky's the limit. So I think skills will become even more essential than just having people. You need people with the right skills, and we need to change our mindset around that. And I think what we'll see is more innovation and more excitement. What I see today coming to life for the future, using AR and VR as a daily occurrence. It's not a video game, it is actually part of your job. And that, I think, is going to be really exciting to this next generation coming up.
I'm going to hopefully be one of those people that tries to stay in an environment where we kind of have a remote first mentality. And it has a lot to do with hiring the best talent and using technologies like Zoom in order to optimize, the interactions with people, not having to show up in an office. And then building a model where we will have shared workspace where needed in cities where we have a few people that can work together, teams that need to spend time together.
Now that there's greater comfort with using remote workers, I think we will see a normalization or maybe a harmonization of global wage scales for certain white-collar work. I'm going to say we're out of the woods as it relates to significant pandemic exposure, well beyond just COVID-19, but other pandemics, et cetera, in 2 years, you could probably see a much greater return to the cities and to the office buildings. Those companies that decide to harness the power of knowledge that exists beyond what they thought of as their 4 traditional walls, that's who's going to win. You're seeing it in the tech companies. Some of the greatest innovations on the planet are coming from open source technology. If you can work remotely, you can work as a digital nomad, provided the technological infrastructure is capable of supporting connectivity, right? So I do think that in terms of the worker choosing where they want to work, if it's a remote job function, they will be able to do that. I also believe that governments will make sure that they get their piece of tax revenue. And so we're just on the front end of how will various governments tax digital nomad economic flows.
In the next 2 to 5 years, I think there's literally going to be a war for talent. The first thing I would say is to understand that not only change is going to be forever, but the pace of change is increasing. I believe that what people really need to understand about change is it is going to not only be perpetual, but the rate of change is going to increase.
The future, they say, is already here. Foresight experts and futurists talk about many things that emerging technology will change, social and political changes will change, and how we can shape the future through foresight. Now, the future is also something we can act towards by proactively doing things that can help us get where we need to be in the future. Here are some of the observations that our esteemed list of guests has when it comes to the future.
If you don't have an abundance of curiosity and a willingness to dig in and learn, you're not going to be able to keep that step ahead that you need to be able to keep.
If we're going to work from anywhere, or even at the minimum work from home, we have to have good connectivity. The emergence of 5th generation of cellular, which is really a game changer. Once that is deployed in a saturated way in our urban environment, our flexibility of where we work and how we work and what we work on is going to change. What we do is changing. Technology is shaping the human experience, right? We want more digitalization. We want more online access to services and products. We want them delivered. And so we are encouraging sort of a delivery infrastructure, which is creating opportunity, plus jobs in the gig economy, of course.
Learning is essential to business success. The most successful companies are learning all the time. They're learning how to be better at what they do today. They're learning how to add value in unique ways. They're learning what the customers want next. They're learning about technologies and how they can automate and improve business processes. So if you're not learning as a company, you're probably falling behind. You can look at management in 2 ways. Number 1, get the job done, hit your numbers, and you'll be rewarded. Number 2, take care of the people, grow the people, build the people for the rest of the organization. And I think more and more companies are pushing to the second, where the role of management isn't just to execute, but also to build people's skills and capabilities so they can be better capable of doing new things inside the company. And those are the companies that have been around a long time and last different business cycles. They're learning organizations. I'm in my 60s and I have no problem learning about new technology. I grew up with, kind of pre-PC days. I think most older people are just as happy to learn about technology as young people, but they might need a little more help. They didn't grow up with social networks. They didn't grow up with mobile phones their whole life, and they might be intimidated, but they'll pick it up. I think the real sort of message to older workers is, number 1, take the time to learn about the tools at work.
Get your human resources or people organization to think more creatively about the engagement model with talent. Because no longer will every person delivering value to the organization be an employee. It might be a freelancer. It might be a gig worker that works for another organization and receives benefits from that organization. There will be many ways that you build out your talent fabric, and the people organization of these companies needs to be ready for that.
I would advise young people to really kind of have a breadth of sort of disciplines that they're at least have some passing familiarity with. Certainly find the one that you really like and dive into that. But I think having sort of this breadth of vision and not pigeonholing yourself too quickly.
As a leader, I've lived with the notion that I call it, you have to let people work when they need to work and do whatever else they need to do whenever else they need to do it. And I've been doing this for years. If when you have kids, they have things they need to do in the afternoon. It's around achievement. It's not when you do it, but the completion of the achievement.
What I'm doing is I'm fractionalizing what most companies would say is their most valuable asset, which is human capital. So we're fractionalizing the workday and the career for the individual worker, and we're fractionalizing the workforce well beyond the full-time employees for the enterprise. That fractionalization is going to drive liquidity into the hottest skills and capabilities, and they'll be market priced.
So my advice would be, in addition to trying to make sure you have the model right, is really working through the rank and file of the organization to make sure that there is buy-in, that there's acceptance, and that there's the true appreciation for why a specific model was selected.
Recommendations? So far, we've seen what the past of work seemed like, what the present is, what challenges we face, and what the future looks like. Here are some recommendations on what we should be doing. What are some of the things that we should maybe incorporate in our industries, in our work, in our capacities as leaders and professionals, and maybe create a better future for work, for ourselves in the future.
My biggest advice for people would be to actually follow the lead of what some of the young people in the workforce have proven to us that works. And that is, be a self-learner. What I've learned from younger workers is don't wait for the organization to teach you how technology works. There is ample opportunity to literally just go on the internet and find self-help to be able to learn how to use technology. So take some responsibility on your own. We often talk about how young people sort of pick this up naturally, and one of the reasons they do that is they're not afraid of going and looking for the answer and trying to figure it out. And I think those of us in the older generation could learn a lot from that. Involve as many diverse voices in the change process as you can.
Where I hope things are going is a really nice balance for people, so that we've got the human interaction that we were so used to in the past, coupled with using technology in order to be able to have the balance that we talked about.
We need to build an infrastructure that allows people to easily access the internet. And by the way, we got to get another few billion people onto the internet, right? Today, the number is about 60% of the world is connected. I think the numbers even maybe into the 60s, because we're connecting people rapidly. But in a world of almost 8 billion people, that means there's still a few billion people that woke up this morning and don't have access to all the benefits of the internet and hyper connectivity.
One of the things I've learned in my career is, every day there's something in the technology environment that's difficult or doesn't work right. If I don't stop and figure it out, later I suffer more. So each one of us has to take a little bit of extra time and learn how to use the tools we have. And the second thing is, for older people, people are living longer. So you may feel like you're the old guy or the old gal, and maybe you're fading out. You're probably not. You're probably more essential and more important as a mentor, as a coach, as an expert than people may realize and that you may realize. And I think old people need to just kind of have a young attitude about their jobs, and that will make it easier for them to learn new things and feel comfortable about some of these intimidating new technologies that really aren't that hard to learn once you just roll up your sleeves and get involved. We're going to be working in different places using different tools. There'll be virtual reality, there'll be voice recognition, there'll be facial recognition. We'll be doing video conferencing. We'll have all sorts of intelligent agents. Things will be recommending what to do and what not to do. And we need to just be comfortable with that. And you don't have to be a software engineer to be comfortable with tools. 90% of the jobs in the economy today are service jobs. We have become a service economy. There are very few highly routine manual labor jobs left. They're there, but there aren't very many of them. And what that means is that employers are beginning to realize and need to realize that the way they treat people and the quality of the work experience and the quality of the jobs is essential to their success as a company. Southwest Airlines isn't a great airline because they buy great planes. They're a great airline because people love working there, and as an outcome of loving working there, they love the customers and they love the passengers, and therefore they are a great company. That is true in every single organization I've ever talked to.
I think even older workers, and I'm a baby boomer, understand that choices are different today. And even the baby boomers don't want to return to the office 9 to 5 anymore. So we need to bring an attitude of change. We need to embrace that. We need to learn, and we need to have a commitment to learning moving forward.
I guess it's the same advice everybody sort of says, is sort of, learn a bunch of things and then find the thing that really, really works for you.
Friends, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. I hope this documentary provided some guidance and some idea on where we're headed. There's so much more to talk, and we've just barely scratched the surface today. I hope you continue this journey and learn more about the future of work. You can contact anybody who was in this documentary or reach out to me and I'll do the introductions. But the future of work is something we have to work on. We have to create and proactively be a participant in. I wish you all the best for your organizations, your governments, your entities, your businesses, and your careers. Have an amazing future and take care of yourself.